Hello everyone and welcome back to the workshop. In today's video I'm going to be showing you around this car here. Probably can't tell what it is. A few people have actually seen it and tried taking a guess, and it's not a DeLorean. No part of this is a DeLorean. It's actually a Lancia Monte Carlo. So this was completely stripped and dipped, and it has brought out some of the bad work that has been done in the past. So basically I need to make two new rear quarters for this. Door skins, sills, front wings, and a few other bits including floors. But basically it's where someone else had a go at it before and hasn't really gone at it in the right way. But that's what I'm here for, I think, so people tell me. And I'm gonna correct all those bits up, as well as all the surface rusted areas where they've grown a bit thin and kind of need correcting along the way. So lots of little bits and some huge bits need doing to this. And I'll show you the progress as we go. So first of all, I'll show you the rear quarters and then what we're gonna do there. As you can see, there's a lot of white pen marks all over the place. They're basically areas that need attention. But as you can see, this rear quarter needs a lot of work. A lot of distortion in here from where it's been welded. It's taken up too much heat, or the actual welds have shrunk and then they've distorted the rest of the quarter. Lots of bits where they've been, you know, someone's had a go at them before and it just hasn't turned out very good. And the way this arch has been put on is just no good, especially how shot the inside is. So that all needs taking off and the inside repairing too. So I'm gonna need to take a good reference of what this quarter is. Difficult to find them. I can't find one, so what we're going to do is going to make one. Might seem like a big old job, big chunk of metal to move, but if we do it step by step, attack it in small steps and address the issue one by one, I reckon we'll get there. So what I'm going to be doing now is we're going to actually get the process of 3D scanning this whole rear quarter so we can take all the references we need, and then also I can actually design the buck in CAD so that I can take out all these divots, smooth it out, get the radiuses right so we know they're in the right place, ready for a good reference for the buck to be made and the panel to then be created on top of that. I should be able to draw up a template for the blank of that as well. Be able to all the reference marks along the way where the folds need to be, and even potentially make some of the tooling for some of the hammered edges and some of the die forming, so I can run these beads to be the right step by actually slicing the panel and actually put it through the power hammer parallel with an edge so that it is smooth and everything lines up all the way through. So what I'm going to actually do now is put some 3D scanning spray on there, which is actually dry shampoo, which gives a reflective base really for the 3D scanner to then pick it up, because it doesn't really like dark material or anything shiny. Yes, it is satin, it's got a bit of a haze to it with this e-coating, but with the scanning spray it's going to help a lot. Plus we're going to put lots of the 3D scanning dots all over it, so they're little reference points for the scanner to pick up along the way. And it's going to look like this car's basically got acne and going through puberty again.
Okay, so now that we've got the marker dots in place and the 3D scanning spray, also known as dry shampoo, we are now ready to actually scan the panels on here to get a good reference of the shape. So you can see, got my laptop set up out of the way here. This is my 3D scanner. It's nothing over the top. So just untangle that. I'm just going to basically scan just the rear quarter. I'll then open up the door so I can get in all of the shut. And then that is going to be then converted on the laptop to get all the references I need from it. But you might just be able to see out a shot here, the actual scanning process of what happens when we do it. Let's go.
Okay, so here we go. We're actually scanning the panel now. So you'll actually see all these little reference dots that are appearing, and those are those little stickers we put down there. They are crucial to have in place because it means that we can actually get the scanner to track whereabouts on the panel it is, and the more random they are, the better. If we didn't have them, it would basically follow parallel lines and it would shoot off. It wouldn't be able to stay still or know whereabouts on the panel it is. But also you can see where the scanning spray is and where it isn't, because we're getting some of these darker zones appear. And the main thing is to go back over those, because we've got those reference dots, it can actually fill in the spaces, which is really helpful because we want as much data as we can possibly get. So I'm going to keep working back and forth now and make sure I do get all these reference points, all these details that I want to carry over to the buck and get it as accurate as possible. Because we're going to be using this as the reference straight onto the buck, we need to carry over all those details. So I need return edges, the arch flare out, even how it wraps around the rear, how it joins to the boot floor. Even the depth of the arch, so I can actually have that as reference on the buck. I'll even be copying some of the bead lines from this if I can't just copy them off the car. But now I'm going to put it through the software. Let's make it a solid form and start to make all the buck form and all the slices to go together. Now that we've got all the slices together, you can really see how it all joins up and what the final buck is going to look like. We've already got the thickness and the tolerances of how the laser cutting is going to be. So we've got the cut reliefs there, but you can really see how we can use this as a gauge. So the thing I'm going to do now, I'm going to send it off to the laser cutters, and then once we get it back, it will all be in pieces and we'll get it assembled.
And there we go, as if by magic, all the laser cutting is done. So as you can see, got it all laid out on the table, ready to start piecing the puzzle together. I do have a diagram that I can copy off of that I made in CAD with the rest of it, but I did make a little boo-boo while I was designing it all. I basically set these up to be laser cut in 1.5 mild steel, and I did get them in 1.5 mild steel, but it didn't give me much of a clearance in these little slots. So I actually had all these little slots in as a 1.5 gap between the edges, and it was just literally bang on for the thickness of the material, made it a bit too difficult for them to slide in together. And I don't want them binding up, because if they bind up, they will tend to flex and deflect the other way. So I've just zipped through them with an angle grinder, open them up that tiny bit more so that it will all slide together nicely, hit into the backstops, and yeah, then it will start to take shape. And I know that I can then probably pull, well, then I'm hoping I can pull it all apart and then flip it over to make the other side of the car. So it's all symmetrical. All the references will be the same for the other side, and it'll just be a case of I will number them all now once it's all together, so that I know where it all goes afterwards and I haven't got to do the whole head scratching all over again. So yeah, really happy I managed to get all this out in CAD. Been trying to figure this out for a while, little achievement for myself, but I won't speak too soon because it's not together yet, so let's go. Okay, so now that you can see, I've got the buck all together. I've just propped it up. All the laser cut pieces slided in nicely after I actually opened them all up with the angle grinder. But as you can see, it got all these reference points, all these different stations along the way, so that we can actually fit the panel so it lines up with each individual section there, and that's how we know we're going to get it accurate over the whole length. This opening here is actually where the wheel arch is. So this is the whole rear quarter. May end up putting a wire edge on here just so I can end up marking the return edge all the way along, or even just laying it, marking it as it sits, so it's easier to take apart and flip over for the other side. But now this is all together, that means can actually start shaping some metal to fit it. So we'll do that now. Right, now I've actually cut out the two wooden forms I'm going to need to dress that top line of the arch, and I've done this by actually taking a radius measurement from the buck of what the arch line is. So this is the outer arch line, and I've got the two pieces here. I've marked up the panel, and what I'm going to do now is actually apply a load of stretch to where the arch is going to flare out. I'm going to do that over on the Pels machine. So by using the power hammer into a hockey puck, it's then going to add a lot of stretch to the outer edge of the arch to then bring the whole thing out. So we're just going to be aiming for some just stretch going into this, not actually aiming to get any shape just yet, mainly focusing on the stretch to get the material to be the right size to actually play with. So I'll take all this off and then I'll move over there. So now over onto the Pels machine here, and here's the panel. You can see probably some of the wheeling marks there, but I've marked up the line on the inside of the panel where the top of the arch line is. And this is so that I know where I'm going to work in between, because over here I've got on the power hammer, this right here is a hockey puck, which I've got a little basically an idea of someone else I follow. Spoke to them, see if it would work in this, and it does, works quite well actually. And all that is, instead of having to beat into the sandbag and basically put stretch in, I can just do it on this. Again, like I say, I'm only trying to stretch the material. I'm not trying to get shape into it or the final form just by this. I'm going to be finishing the rest off by hand ideally, but this is just to actually, like I say, move the material so I've got something to work with. So I'm going to get it in there, all freehand. I won't be using any of the tracking to line up, just got to stay within the lines, you know how I practiced with my crayons when I was growing up. Start stretching it out, and then you'll slowly see the form come together. It will start to bow the whole panel, but that is then just so that we can get it to the right shape, and it will end up straightening itself out once we got the final form and shape into the arch. Right, let's get it in there. Now you can see after doing all the stretching on the power hammer there, it's actually flared the arch out where it's going to be, moved the material, so we've got plenty to work with there. What I'm now going to do is test it onto the buck to see if all lines up. And after a few goes back and forth, I have checked it against it. This isn't a first time thing. It looks like it is all starting to fit together quite nicely. So basically where that line is actually dropping into the vertical stations, it's fitting very well. So what I'm going to have to do now is, as you can see, you can't really see an edge to where the arch is. So where that line is on the back is actually where the top edge of the arch should be. I'm actually going to put this back in those wooden formers I cut earlier. So it's going to be sandwiched between those, and it means I can then use the top one as a guide and then the bottom one as a form, just by chasing it round. And probably best I show you so it makes more sense, but that's how we're going to get the edge back in there. Now you can see that I've got the panel basically sandwiched between these two bits of plywood. So like I said, the top one is basically a guide to where we're going to actually be hitting into the form below it. And by holding them together, it means it's not going to kind of return back on itself. It means we're going to be pushing all that material in a single direction. And that's basically where I just follow along this top edge. And if you could imagine this line here, that is basically the same as what's underneath for the sheet metal to follow along. And then after that, we can manipulate the arch to where it needs to go. But first, let's do this top edge. I've now got that edge a lot sharper for the wheel arch, and even put it in the box pan folder to fold and put a break in there for the top line. I'm actually going to pass this through the English wheel now, smooth out a lot of that material I moved earlier on, and actually get it shaped where it needs to be. And I've also put the line in place for where the brake's going to be. So that's going to be where we're going to tip the edge on the bead roller. Well, as some of you may have seen in a previous video, how I like to set up the bead roller to basically tip a soft edge without having to kind of gouge into it or really have a sharp edge as it goes along. I like to set up the tipping die bottom wheel, so a completely flat die on the bottom, and then for the top roller die, I actually use a wide radius, and I'll then follow along the center of that radius along that line, so it will still kind of break the edge and you know, tip it, but it won't gouge into it as much, and it actually gives it a very small radius to then move the material against that, and it still works just as well as a normal tipping die. So pass it through now, just going to break it over, and then we'll move the rest over by hand. Okay, right, now I've got the panel sitting on the buck with the return edge on the arch there. I've got it all sitting how I want it to. One of the next steps I'm going to do is actually put the bead in. There is actually a bead that goes along the kind of center section of the quarter, and I'm going to do that by a set of dies that I've made. And I've actually made these to copy the bead that's already on there. I've even measured them against it and run a few test pieces to make sure it's right. I'm going to put these in the power hammer just so we can pass them through and get that little stepped edge all the way along. Doing that bit now, because if I was to then roll the lower section of this quarter, I wouldn't actually be able to have it really reach in the machine properly, because where that wraps round, it'd then end up rotating the panel on the tracking I got in there, or it'd end up binding up in the machine. So going to that step now, and then we're going to move to the lower section of the wing afterwards.
Right there. That's what we're after.
Coming together.
This do feel so.
Okay, so now you can really start to see the whole of the quarter really taking shape. I've moved on to the bottom edge now. As you can probably see here, I've just been in the box pan folder, done 2 folds. So fold it one way, flip it over, and then fold it back the other. So that then creates a step in there. And I've also passed it through the English wheel with the band on top. So it gives a bit of a radius there to then basically make the sill section. So I've got a cap off the end now. I'm going to tip over the rear section here to tie in with the rest of the arch. And then that means all of this strength will be then held in at the end until I move on to the door gaps to then tie in the front edge. So let's move on to that. So now the next step is to actually tip this inner edge here to create the door gap. So this is actually what's going to return for the actual door shut there. I'm going to tip this over on the bead roller, that's behind me, and I've actually put this up against the car just to make sure I've scribed it, along with mark it up against the door skin to make sure they are the right radiuses. Now it's time to actually put it in the bead roller, knock this edge over, and then start welding on the inside. Let's go to it. Okay, so now that I've actually got the door shut line tipped over where it needs to be, I actually need to make the door shut itself. So this is basically what the B pillar is going to be. So as you can see, it's got a curve in it that way. I've managed to step an edge in there, and I've also done a little impression there with a little tool I made that I just put into the hydraulic press. I'll come over to camera and show you a bit better. So basically just a couple bit of scrap bits of plate. I've cut those out, and that bit goes in the middle. All it does, lines up with the actual bolt holes of the for the latch to go in there, and that bit just drops down in there, and you'll see that kick up matches what's on the actual door shut, and this flat section is where the latch is going to go. So now that I've got that made up, I need to weld it in place, so I'll move on to that now. Okay, so now I've actually got that all welded in place, as you can see there, and I think that is a good point to stop at, because I think we can say that's a rear quarter panel. A lot has gone into making this, as you've seen, not just the designing of this, but also the designing of the buck. So using the 3D scanner for that was really helpful, and you can see how they can be useful just in an everyday workshop, just to design small things that on the computer you don't want to be cutting out by hand, just get that little bit more accuracy. I hope you've learned a lot. So using all these variety of tools definitely puts the workshop to use, because I think I've used every tool in here. And it just goes to show what really goes into making something like this. But in the next video, I will be kind of finishing off, and I've got a few other things planned for the 3D scanner. And that'll actually be making some guides and tooling directly from some 3D scans. And this could be something even you could put into practice at home using some very basic tools. But I'll be tinkering about with that. I've got a couple of things in the back of my mind for it. But I really hope you've enjoyed watching this video, and I really hope you stick around to see some of the others. So if you want to see some more techniques that really go into making things like this, I do hope you hit that subscribe button, even hit that bell. So when the next video comes out, you'll get a notification, and then we're going to plow on, finishing this or actually designing the other bits I'm talking about. You'll have to wait and see what they are. But you'll be able to see why we can use such a variety of tools using new and old techniques, modern and traditional, really putting it into practice and making them all work together. It's not what everyone does, but it's nice to actually make it work and actually prove it does work. I hope you've enjoyed the video, like I said, and I'll see you next time.